the session is around waterfall versus hybrid versus agile project methodologies. But rather than me kind of just walking you through the slides, we can just do a quick review. But I'm hoping this will kind of be an open discussion. I do have a few questions selfishly that I would like to ask as well to get the conversation going and get some answers. So I'll start walking through the slides and then we can go into a discussion. If that works. Cool. So, oh, I'm not showing my screen. Holy scholar. There you go. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at my larger screen, not ignoring you. So we have waterfall, which is the most traditional methodology of project management. It's been, I think, the longest. Any courses you've done around like Prince 2 or any of that covers waterfall methodology. There is obviously benefits and disadvantages to all of these. So we'll go through that. Waterfall is linear. You kind of plan up front and then deliver in phases. It helps with stakeholder management. Is really good for reporting. I think stakeholders tend to prefer reporting kind of overall rather than in stages as you would do on an agile project. Predictable outcomes, you know exactly what's happening when, you know what's being delivered, and then you move on to the next phase. So it's easier to also plan around. There are disadvantages with this one where if it's a longer project, if you have a build phase, by the time you're kind of done with it, some of it might become irrelevant. Dependencies, you know, you building something in parallel and might just not work with it. Delayed testing, you don't know if it's worked or if it works for you till you get to the testing phase. Sorry, just 1 second, my dog's. Yeah, sorry. I lost my thought. Yeah, and there's no flexibility around the build. You kind of design, you plan, you build, you get to it. If there's any changes, it's not easy to kind of move around to make changes as you're going. Then we have Agile, which is, I think, newer compared to Waterfall. I remember, I think about 6 years ago, no, 7 years ago, I was on a program and there was this thing about agile project managers and how everyone wanted them, but we couldn't provide them because we only had like regular project managers. And every client was after this fancy new way of working. Was it 6? Might have been 10, who knows? But yeah, so agile is more iterative. You have flexibility. You have a product in mind or a delivery in mind, but you kind of break it down into iterations. You develop, you test, you develop, you test, you revisit the design, see if any changes can be made, and kind of move forward with that. Advantages, flexibility, obviously. If you deliver something and it doesn't work, or it doesn't work with the design or the end result, you can go back and fix it as part of the next sprint. You can work with stakeholders, customer expectations, and improved quality, because again, you're not kind of waiting till the end to test. You develop your test. It's not as predictable because you can't really plan end-to-end projects. My last role, actually, we were forbidden from giving customers, our business clients, a timeline, even though they'd ask, can we get a rough estimate? We weren't allowed to give them rough estimates because you couldn't commit to those dates because of the way the project was running and how different people had different kind of story points and how they measured those. Less documentation, because unless you plan documentation as part of your sprint, as part of your delivery, it kind of gets left to the end. And if you are going through 3, 4 sprints and then coming to complete documentation, there's a lot of kind of lost work that doesn't get documented because people have forgotten or things have changed along the way. And then we have hybrid, which in a lot of places you'll hear Vagile, or what is it? There's another word, I can't remember, but it's very weird. But this is essentially what that is. It's a combination of both waterfall project methodologies and agile. it's you kind of have an upfront high level plan that you can use to share with stakeholders, to use for reporting, and to track milestones against. But it's very high level. We're not never kind of call depends on stakeholders, but you're never called out on missed milestones because you're reporting against them iteratively as you're developing. Also has its advantages and disadvantages. Again, it supports with stakeholder management, with reporting, which is what a lot of places, I mean, you have a program that's going to run a year. No one wants to see just the next 3 months. They want to see the next year. They want to see dependencies. If you have inter portfolio or inter project dependencies, this is easier to kind of, this one calls them out. If you need to make changes because a team can't support you during development because you have a dependency on them, you can move things around. You can update your plan and report against it. This does increase complexity though, because you are combining different methodologies. It's also how do you kind of map it across? Sorry, lost my train of thought. Um, it is complex though. You do have to look at the details, but you're also looking at high level. So it does get complicated, but personally, this is what's worked best for us. It's easier to update designs. It's easier to make scope changes if required. Call out dependencies early in advance enough that you can get resource commitment, but also move change plans around if you can't. Any questions on that so far?
Yeah, I'm curious actually. It's less of a question, but have it as Shamil is going through these, what is there a particular approach your organization uses more?
At home, I would say we've got two distinct camps. We've got your more typical IT projects, which are upgrades, network things, which I would say follow really traditional waterfall practices. But we have an engineering department. We've built our own pet care platform that follows the agile approach, and they only work with an agile methodology. And I would say they don't meet, apart from when it's shared resources. They will deliver their elements. If there's a combined project, they will deliver their components following an agile way. But I guess the infrastructure side will deliver it following a more traditional way if we need to.
Same at Sainsbury's. Our programs are run as a hybrid where we do have high level planning.
Yeah.
A year on, but detailed planning happens for each quarter. But the team itself runs in an agile kind of fashion. They have their sprint plannings and story points and all of that, and we kind of try and match those. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's kind of just being the go-between and trying to understand how a team works versus what needs to be reported on.
Do you feel like with those approaches, do you find a lot of waste? And when I say waste, I mean like time wasted putting things together, or does it work? Do you get a lot of resistance because, to your point, Sharmila, like people in the business needing to plan? Like how does that approach work for you both in the organization?
For us, sorry, go on.
No, you go first, Shamila.
For us, it started when we started the project. Yes, there was a lot of duplication, a lot of, no, this is not what we meant, and this is not what we said we deliver. There's a lot of but now that we've got into the rhythm and we understand what the engineering team means with their story points and how they've estimated that, and also we have historic data, so it's easier to now report on and kind of set expectations. But I think setting that up, and if it's a brand new team, especially, getting that understanding going with the doers is very important.
I think that's where we are now with our agile teams. And I think it's because we've built our own platform and our own products. There's a little bit of trial and error at the moment in is what we're developing meeting the need at the end. I think in the waterfall space, there's very little waste because we have a planned portfolio at the start of the year. We know what we've got to deliver in terms of upgrades, new hardware or software we've got to roll out. So we can plan that in with the resources. It's different in the agile space because they are responding to emerging needs in our retail environment.
Nicola?
Yeah, I was just going to share, it's interesting, like hearing you guys talk, that it sounds like there's an agreement or like a planned way of doing projects. Like I think Justine, I think the idea is that we are running using Agile, but there's definitely a hybrid piece going on to make it align with kind of the things that you said. So like the annual like budgeting, reporting out to business stakeholders. So we do, I think we have like some benefits of the agile in there, some benefits of a bit of the waterfall approach, but it's kind of, I don't think we acknowledge what it is that we are trying to do or what we've currently got. So yeah, we seem to make it work, and it does work, but it's yeah, I think it's probably like some of these disadvantages of hybrid are things that sound like quite familiar.
I mean, I don't think so. If you talk to our engineering teams, they will bang on about we are agile. Stop telling me this and stop asking me that. So it is being the go-between and saying, yes, I know you're agile, but and it's kind of working with them, but they will say, no, we're agile. Do not bring this into my sprint, or do not bring, I don't want to see this just yet. Why didn't you bring this at the start of the sprint? So we do have those conversations. We do have those arguments. It's kind of just working around them.
Yeah.
Anita?
Hi, Shamila. Thank you very much. I have a question. So, how do you measure the outcome following the hybrid methodology on a project?
When you say outcome, is it what we deliver at the end?
Yes, that's correct. Because if you are taking the balance, it's good. And I'm just trying to understand. Sorry, I'm not a project manager, so please treat me as if I don't know anything. But I'm just keen to understand, how do you measure the outcome? As in, like, you define the outcomes in the first place, as in like the scope of the project. But because you're taking both approaches, which you call as a balanced approach, how do you measure the outcomes then?
So if I look at what we are doing, we have a product that we're delivering. We have a product manager. And we also, with this, the annoying thing about, not annoying, but the good thing about this is we have our designs drawn up front. We know what we're working towards. We know what the end goal is in terms of delivery, what the business values are, because we do have to do our business cases and all of that. So we need to go back and measure. We do this every quarter to ensure that everything we're delivering is still, we are still meeting the initial kind of goal that we had and the business benefits that we were working towards. Are we still delivering to the HLDs that we had presented and have approved? If there's any changes along the way, getting those approved as well. But it's going back to why you started the project. Again, I don't know. I've worked on projects. I don't know. Anna's worked on upgrades, so it might be different. But when you have a kind of end deliverable that you need, you kind of keep trying to go back and view that. I don't know if Perry, Anna, Ellie.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you're totally right. And my experience with definitely product teams is you have that kind of those OKRs of what needle is that product looking to, or the change you're looking, what needle is that looking to move, and then once you deliver that feature, you can then kind of relate that back to say, oh, actually, over X number of months, are we shifting the needle as well? So I think that makes total sense. But otherwise, in a project, one of the projects I'm working on at the moment is I'm meant to be kind of doing like a kind of like a Jira transformation program where the outcome is actually very, very clear. Are we all working in Jira, for example? That's my outcome. And so sometimes it's sometimes can be a lot more well defined in terms of have I done my job? Whereas with a product project, it might be a little bit more nuanced and it takes a little bit more kind of digging into, are you actually realizing the change you're looking to make?
Yeah, as a follow-on to Perry, I think God, you can tell we've worked together based on how he's described it. But like, if I put it into a bit of context to help this group understand, so we might have in our groceries and retail domain for at Just Eat, we might have a target of growing the number of active grocery and retail partners by 49,000 by the end of the year. So what we will do is every time we implement something new on our platform, we will assess how far, I think Perry used the word move the needle, but move the dial, move the needle, how far along have we moved by releasing X things. So a good example will be, we recently, over the last year, we've given the ability for people to substitute their items if they're doing a grocery order through our Just Eat platform. By enabling that opportunity, we had more grocery partners reaching out to us saying, we really want to be on the platform because you give the ability for the customer to pick what substituted item they wanted. So we then perhaps get, I don't know, 11,000 co-op stores that come online, and that moves us towards our goal for the year. What I think is always really important with these outcome metrics, and I'm going to kind of call it above or below the line, an activity that we've started doing at Just Eat is we'll say, for example, we've got 5 programs of work that are above the line, and we believe they're going to enable us to hit that 49,000. If as we're regularly reviewing our metrics, if we feel like we're not going to hit our targets, we'll look at some of the programs that we were considering doing, which I call below the line, and kind of go, actually, is it worth us stopping some of our current work and pivoting so we hit our outcomes for the year? I hope that was explained sufficiently enough.
Yes, it was helpful. Thank you very much. What I was trying to understand is, as I was saying, I worked as a governance and assurance manager on infrastructure projects, and sometimes when we are when we are working on the project's scope, sometimes we have to go back and adjust the scope because midway we expected the outcome to change. And I was just curious to understand that if we are taking both the approaches, how do we manage the outcome? But I think you explained it very well. Thank you. Are we moving on?
Yes, sorry, just one second. Let me just
There
bring.
was a question from Martha in the chat. I don't know if you saw that, Shamila.
No, sorry. Which of these methodologies work better for managing dependencies? Personally, I think hybrid. It's easier to manage. It's easier to call them out. If the dial shifts, you can kind of track those as you're going. Actually, no, maybe waterfall. Ooh, that's a hard one. Waterfall, you know the dependencies up front. You have a rough idea of when they will fall. So I guess that is easier. Ooh, this one's a hard one.
What are other people's thoughts on this that are in the group? Like, has anyone else had experience of managing multiple dependencies, and which approaches work best for them?
I think it depends what type of project you're working on, doesn't it? Like in Pets at Home, our biggest dependencies are the resources that we need. So they're almost a constraint. You know, if I need a resource from a particular team to complete something, that's a dependency that will prevent me going. In terms of inter-project dependencies, we don't have that many, but it's a sequencing problem. So then waterfall is easier, I think, to know to plug those in, because it's kind of a linear way of working. I think agile is a little bit trickier because you're working iteratively. You might not realize you've got a dependency till you're part way through the development, or am I wrong?
I'd maybe suggest even lifting that outside of dependency management, even lifting that outside of which methodology you're using. But I think you're right in terms of like with agile development, you might kind of have a dependency come in, you know, after you've done sort of, you know, looking forward to what your next couple of sprints might be, and you think, oh wow, I need infosec or whatever. But I wonder sometimes if it's actually your program governance or project governance actually helps you lay a foundation which says, how am I going to track dependencies, regardless of which methodology I'm using, whether it's waterfall, and I can kind of see what you're saying, Shamila, as well. Like sometimes you might say, regardless of if it's waterfall, my basis of how my program and project governance means that I'm able to effectively at least capture and track the dependencies I know of. Because even in waterfall, I can guarantee there'll be kind of dependencies or requirements that come left field that you just have to respond to. Similar with Agile, similar with any kind of type of project you're working on. So I think it's having that foundation of good governance, which then sets you up for success.
Nagander? You're on mute.
Apologies about that, and apologies for coming in late. I agree with you. It's a difficult question, and I think I agree with Perry as well, as to depends, on the dependencies that are coming through. But having worked on both a lot more in waterfall, I find Agile is much better, because when the scope creep starts, you can stop at the sprint and say, thank you very much. This is how the delay is going to be by another 3 weeks, 2 weeks. This is the extra cost, and this is the resource I need to bring in. And with all those impacts, the end game is going to be looking slightly different. So at that point, your customer has to help you decide what is the outcome of this. And usually the minute you mention there's the additional cost, and it may only be, I don't know, 50K or something. Oh, no, this isn't good. So that scope creep, tends to stay. And also depends on the complexity of the programs. And one of the things, isn't it a big buzzword to be saying fail early and fail cheap with Agile? So, you can see it's coming, because in the past, we've just been saying, yes, we'll do it. And then we've delayed it, or things have happened, and then IT is all wrong because we delayed it. We went over the budget. We did everything, right? And people forget that we're trying to please the customer. So I've reached a point where, I'm pretty much adamant that if you want to do, any change, we can negotiate that change. If it is trivial, fine, we can bake that in. Apart from that, sorry, this is the repercussion. Are you prepared to take it? And take it right up to the food chain, the program board. And if it has to get into the execs and the board, so be it. That's my experience. Thank you.
Nicola, you hand your hand up.
I did, yeah. And then I suppose the point's kind of been said a couple of times. I was just going to agree, with Perry, and then it was agreed with as well around the different methodologies and the dependencies, because I think working in both sort of different environments, to be honest, I think a lot of stuff just sort of ends up being some kind of mixed hybrid. But in both of those, you've got to know what your dependencies are. Even if you're working in waterfall, there's things that are going to be missed and don't get picked up. But the landscape within which you're working in will constantly be changing as well. So you've got to be constantly managing those dependencies. And I think there's different types of dependencies, and we have discussions quite often about product and tech type dependencies and how they're getting surfaced and how do we see those, and then more delivery type dependencies, so programs that are also making changes in the same space, and as a program manager, just trying to keep on top of all of those. I think whichever methodology you're using, it's always a challenge to get that right. And keeping that kind of communication between whoever you've got a dependency on or to. So I think there's always lots of things that we can do better and keep learning how we can manage our dependencies better. We definitely have a lot within Just Eat. There's lots of different teams, lots of different moving parts that we have to just constantly keep up with. Just sharing a view on the dependencies.
Sorry, I'm going to butcher your name.
It's okay. It's fine. It's indeed. So just to go back to what Perry said about governance. So I think sometimes there's a slight hesitation when we know that there are dependencies, but it could either be a risk or an issue. And I think using what Perry was insinuating, which is having the governance structure of identifying that, okay, this is a risk, or we know that it's going to be an issue, will help how we then tend to manage those dependencies. And yes, I agree, you know, having both methodologies working together can be cumbersome, especially if it's a different team, it's a different thing. But if you're, for me, the biggest issue I always have is the resource, the SMEs to actually help with the work. And because they fall into teams where they overlap, it's always very difficult to identify if the dependency is as a result of them having their BAU commitments versus them being able to contribute and be part of the project that it's delivering. So what I always try and do to sort of navigate through the whole, okay, yes, I know that it's a dependency, is I identify it very quickly as a risk. And I identify it very quickly as an issue. So it's always part of the conversation. So we sort of already anticipate that, okay, X is going to happen as a result of this person not being available, or like Nandi just said, this resource is not available, it's going to cost us this. So it doesn't come up as all of a sudden we just realize that there's a dependency. We've already sort of set the tone at the beginning to identify that these are sort of like the touch points where we're going to have fluctuations in how we're going to be delivering stuff, regardless of whatever methodology we're using.
Resource dependencies is a hard one. I'm also working on a project now where we have a project, but we're not a project team. I'm borrowing people from different teams to do work for me. So it's managing my backlog with their backlog. So I have 3 product managers yelling at me saying, no, that was not on the plan. So it's interesting. Yeah. I just have some questions on the screen to kind of kickstart the discussion, but we're already going, so feel free to pick and choose. Going off the governance piece, how does the PMO function or the PMO role kind of translate across these methodologies? Is it additional kind of governance on one versus another? Is it different? I'm going to throw this question to Anna.
Well, at Pets at Home, in my world, I do governance and assurance in the waterfall space. I've been firmly told, keep your beak out of the agile space. So the only element we overlap with is budget management, because PMO manages all the project budgets across all deliveries in IT. And there's that touch point of resources, because there are some resources that sit in the agile space that we need for waterfall deliveries, but we are not invited, or we've been asked to stay firmly away from any other type of assurance in agile. So I'd be keen to understand what sort of value PMO adds in that space, because at the moment the heads of that team, I've never tried for it because my boss has said keep out, but I'd be interested to know what value other organisations perceive PMO could add in the agile space.
We love our PMO function. We are one of the only teams that has managed to get a full PMO team. I think it's such a big program. And especially if you have Scrum Masters aren't as interested in like the raids and all of that. So it's getting them to kind of raise it at the right time and track it for us, we use Jira as a tracking tool. So tracking that and then flagging it upwards, because they manage some of the reporting that Scrum Masters just don't enjoy doing. So for us, we do love our PMO function because they protect us from a lot of the stakeholders, and they're like that middle layer, gathering information and then feeding it upwards. I don't know if it's the same in other places.
My signal dropped. Hello, I missed the back end of that. I just said all I heard was laddering up information into leadership or something.
Yeah, essentially that is what PMO does for us, kind of protects us from that upper layer and the noise that might come down. They do all the formatting and the reporting. It's just like we give them the information and then they take care of it. But also we have a very robust portfolio reporting kind of piece of work that does take up a lot of time, and they kind of protect us from that. They also did our transformation. They also got us, every single team within our program, onto Jira, because obviously we were on different platforms, some tracking on Excel because we have third parties. They kind of also set the governance and kind of said, this is what you're doing, get on board. That's it.
Yeah, we use different tools, unfortunately, for portfolio management in the agile space and waterfall, and PMO does not have access to the agile space at the moment, so I can't even get in to get access to the data to go, look what we could help you do. So that's the challenge I'm facing at the moment, but I've been told don't worry about it for now. So yeah, that's why I was interested to know how PMO supports in the agile space.
Nicola.
Anna, I don't know if you know, but like when you talk about like the agile space, I'm assuming that, you know, they've still got outputs, deliverables, things that they're trying to achieve and deliver for other business stakeholders, or because
but they don't report on them. They got 12 weeks and they say, we'll tell you at the end what we've managed to do at the moment. We're only in our third quarter of working this way, and getting to the minimal viable product took 2 years. And so they stopped talking about deadlines. So it's like we get a little bit of a feed in from one person into like consolidated reporting, but it's very tentative, and you know, but like I say, I've been told to stay firmly away. They're in different reporting lines, different chain of command, so it's one I'd like to go after, but I've been told to stay away.
Yeah, because I think you can, like, obviously you can see it as well, but there'll definitely be value add that a PMO can bring into that space. And like where I said, we have this sort of like a messy hybrid version going on that we have to work with, but it's something that I feel like we would benefit from having a PMO in our space that actually does the role of a PMO, but it's doing it in a way that can like help and enable the teams and do some of that bridging of the gap that Shamila was talking about earlier. So I think maybe one way to come at it, but it sounds like they're in a very luxurious position where they can just deliver or just be delivering, and they're kind of like kept quite to one side. But if they are having stakeholders and things that are expecting outputs, and they're expecting to see things, and they want to see reports, and they want to see progress and value, and that's where I think PMO could help kind of come and structure and shape some of that for them.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to step. We've got a few new managers coming in, so I'm hoping when they arrive that we'll, you know, they can see what the lay of the land is, and they can help maybe open some doors, because I think people are just in a habit of working this way, and there needs to be a little bit of a mindset shift in that particular team that I need support with to get that a little wedge in that door open for me to get my foot in and start showing the value we can add.
Yeah, interesting.
The problem with agile, like loyalists, I want to say, they're very strict about their ceremonies and how they do things and the tools they use, and it's really hard as an outsider to come and be like, let's try and do this, and they're like, no, but this is how I do things, and this is how I measure things, and this is how I report. So that does become a problem, especially if you're an outsider coming in and trying to kind of change things around for them. That's been my experience anyway. I don't know if it's still the same. Alice?
Yeah, I've been listening to the different feedbacks that you've been saying, but from my experience as a business analyst through PM, where I've been involved in the projects, I think apart from one organization that I've worked to date, you start by saying that, oh, it's going to be agile, especially when it comes to agile projects, but it ends up being a hybrid. And the buzzword now, they say it's agile. It's a combination of waterfall and agile. Would go ahead and do the do the selection with the product owner and the one who lead, and then just take the 2 or 3 core developers or whatever. But when it comes to things like signing of documents or assessing business cases are required, then there are delays and things, you see. So they said it's agile, less documentation, but we end up having more documentation. And so far with most of the sectors I've worked with, it all ends up being that, apart from government-related projects or like the council, they are always waterfall. They even say it's agile, but they end up being waterfall. And it's got its advantages and disadvantages, as you earlier on shared, especially when it comes to like council work, because after that one, because of lots of regulatory requirements and government orders and things, it's got to be stage by stage, and budgets involved are quite big, and you can't afford to lose track. So I guess in a nutshell, me personally, I think it all depends on the kind of project that you are doing. You do a landscape view, or have a background of the ecosystem of the organization, because the bottom line is that you still need to deliver projects within time, within budget and high standards, or even if it's agile per each of the sprints, at the end of the day, why we go back to the goal of why are we doing this project, regardless of the methodology. So it's a mixture of both, and customizing the team and the project and the organization combined. Yeah, that's my suggestion. Okay.
And Didi, I think I said that right.
Hi, I just have a question for Anna. So your agile team, are they? I know you mentioned, during this conversation, you have sort of like development teams or engineering teams, and then you have a different arm. So I'm assuming that your agile team are literally developing stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, consistent with agile way of working, you probably will not get any information from them.
Exactly.
Because obviously they're delivering software, so there's very strict rules that they have to abide by. But having said that, what I would say is a way for you to get an in is probably speak to the project manager or the product owner, and just probably ask. Sometimes they might invite you to their stand-up. So usually their stand-up will probably be like 10 minutes where they call about issues, blockers, and an update or whatever. So try and get an in that way. So just because the stand-up, they generally will talk about what they're delivering within that sprint. So say their sprint is 2 weeks, that stand-up is going to focus on what they're going to deliver for the 2 weeks they're going into and what went well the 2 weeks before. So see if you can get an in into that, and then that just gives you an idea of probably the team and how they're working. And because you're with the product owner, you're not necessarily disturbing the people that are doing the do. So they can get on with working, and you can sort of get information that you need from the person who's there, ensuring that they're working, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Thank you. That's a good tip.
I have one more question. I don't know if Kevin can help with this or anyone else. Is how do we keep on top of these methodologies and the changing technologies that are used to support this? Because we use Jira currently, but we have a supplier who uses ADO exclusively, so it's the translation. And how do you kind of keep on top of all of these as things are changing? Like I'm doing agile, I'm doing what hybrid now, but I personally don't work in an agile team because I'm DM and I kind of sit over across these work streams. My next project might be like part of an agile team, and things are obviously changing as you're going. How do you keep on top of these?
I think the Association of Project Management have a lot of free webinars. That's a useful resource for, I guess, the theory side. In terms of the actual tech, that's a hard one. Until you get a chance to get to it, you don't get a chance. I've got the same, all our engineers use ADO. I can't get access to it even to have a nosy round. So I've asked somebody to do me a demo to see, because I think that will also inform me of how I could show that the PMO could add value. But I think that just comes with opportunity.
Perry?
I was going to be cheeky and say, come to things like this, because networking and meeting other professionals is actually a really good way to understand, oh, how are things being done at Pets at Home, or how are things being done at Sainsbury's, and actually you do get value from these kind of connections as well. So speaking to other people, having a mentor, that kind of thing, or just networking actually just gives you a lot of insight as to kind of what's going on outside your organization. Because I've been sometimes in a place where I'm so fixated on what this organization is doing, I don't really have a chance to look up or look out as to what's going on outside as well. So that could be one way.
I just want to add that the organization with which I used to work, they used to assess the skill set of the project managers on annual basis. And if there was any gap, they used to organize these training sessions, be it with APM or Prince 2 certifications. And there were other subject matter experts or senior PMs to give shoulder trainings or these sort of trainings. So I don't know if the organizations with which you work can implement something like this, but it used to do on annual basis within Ementon, so a company I used to work. Because every company has some sort of training budget they keep aside, especially with their learning and development team.
Sure. Yes.
I think for me, it's the emergence of generative AI and how that is going to be integrated with, say, for instance, Jira as an example. So there's the whole focus on trying to master using a platform, a PM tool, and then someone's coming and say, "Oh, I can give you an API. I'll just plug it in, type your chat, and boom, it's done." So I guess it's the combination of changing your mindset to how AI can help you improve your processes but still understanding that you're basically still using the same tool, but with an additional support system. And I think that's where the struggle is going to be, because then it'd be like, oh, if you've got AI tapped into this, then do you really need me? Yes, because you're the one that's going to feed into the process. AI doesn't know the process. You're going to have to feed in the data for it to then understand the process, to then give you an output that's probably quicker than what you would have done. Case point scheduling or case point planning. So for me, I think it's the evolution of that, and how companies like Jira and adaptive work and all the other PM tools, how they're going to start looking to do that. Would it just be like a little chat GPT box, or would it actually be a very technical thing that's going to be plugged in or form the base of whatever platforms we're using at the moment? I think that's where my shift is going, if that makes any sense.
No, I love Copilot, so I'm all for it.
Fair enough.
I hate taking meeting notes. I love Copilot. Anything else anyone wants to kind of praise or in the last 8 minutes? Sorry?
I've got a burning question from something you mentioned at the start, where you said your management team didn't want you to give date commitments to your stakeholders. How did you manage that? Because that, for me, that would feel uncomfortable. But how did you manage that?
We started with refusing point blank, saying I cannot give you a timeline. But then it was but we do understand obviously that these business teams have a dependency on the stuff we're delivering to then work on their pieces. So we did do a rough understanding. I mean, the Fibonacci sequence, when you're doing like story points, it's so subjective depending on the person and the team, and you can try and explain it, but it's not always kind of consistent. So we had to give them a really kind of rough timeline of, look, we can get it done within a month or something. So we were trying to kind of do a rough estimate at the start of the sprint of not just the sprint stories, but also anything that would follow on, to give them kind of some dates. We were working on a regulatory program as well. So as much as we would have liked to have held back, we had to do some work on it. So yeah, it was just additional work that teams weren't happy with, but we had to sit down with our product manager to understand what the end deliverable was and work through reasonably when we could deliver these things. So it went back to, yes, we did not want to give you a timeline, but you can't work in an agile space when you're not working as an individual team, delivering something individually, if that makes sense.
No, awesome. Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. Cheers.
Sorry, I'm slightly confused. Maybe because I work from a different environment, but a project should have a schedule, should it not?
If you're working in a purely agile function, you can have high level kind of, let's aim to deliver this by this time. But if you're talking about individual pieces of work, it's harder to estimate because you look at it as you're going. You estimate in 2 week sprints and you say, this is what I'm going to deliver in the next 2 weeks, and that's all I'm going to look at. We don't even kind of deep dive into anything that's being delivered after till in the next sprint till we get to that sprint.
Okay.
Anything else? And that's all. I give you 4 minutes back.
I'm going to take those 4 minutes and offer them to Ellie, because I think there's probably some discussion around the longer term plan for this group and what we want from you guys that are shown up today. Ellie, do you have any words on that?
Yeah, I love it how he comes to me as I'm like eating my lunch and that cheeky. Yeah, like thank you for joining today. I hope those that were new to the community have found it a useful session to get to know a few other people. Hopefully you've made some good connections. We are living proof that not only do you learn how other organizations are doing things, but it has also led to different career opportunities for some of the people who attend these sessions regularly. I do feel like I'm doing a bit of a plea for help here, but with really good intent. Like there's a number of us that have ran these sessions for the last year. We're really passionate, as we've said, about supporting people's careers, but we can't do that without this group like turning up, getting involved, helping us run these sessions. So if you found today useful, yes, add us on LinkedIn. Please get involved in our platforms, our read platforms, but also don't feel afraid to reach out and say, I've got a problem that I'd love to get some support on in my area of work, or I really struggle with confidence. Could we have some sessions around confidence? Or I'd really love to understand some of the people's career routes. Like all these things we're really interested in. But like I said, we really do need some help. So if you found these sessions useful, please turn up for future sessions. Please join the Mighty Network that we have available, which has over 500 project program managers you can connect with. It's also got all of our recordings. It's got ways to look out for mentors. It's got useful resources to help you in your career. And if you're interested in speaking at future webinars or events, like I said, please reach out to me, whether that's through LinkedIn. If you know me personally, just drop me a message. I'm really keen to hear what you'd like to discuss in future sessions.
Yeah, and from my perspective, this is only one format of what we could do. So, you know, there are 600 people, as Ellie said, in the Women Tech programme that work in these areas. So we'd like to think that there are things we can all do to help each other. So if you've got any thoughts on other types of content that would be useful, let Ellie and the team know, because we'll make those things happen. And you can get about 30 seconds back now. So yeah. Sorry, guys.
Thank you, Sharmila, as well.
Thank you so very much, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Very helpful.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.